Hey everyone, it's Dr. Mounce, and welcome back to All Things Unexplained, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright unbelievable. Today's episode is a little different and a real treat. I was recently invited as a guest on the Portal Room podcast, hosted by Paul Ramos and Christian Carroll. It was an incredible conversation where I got to open up about how I first got into UFOs and the paranormal, my thoughts on Bigfoot, the bizarre and viral Giza pyramid story, my experience on Beast Games, and a whole lot more. This is the full audio from that interview, presented here with the generous permission of Paul and Christian. Huge thanks to them. I highly recommend checking out their channel at youtube.com/@PaulRamos19, where you can watch the original video version of this episode. I'll also include the direct link to the video in our show description. So sit back, keep your eyes on the skies, and your ears open. Let's step into the Portal Room.
Yo, what up, peeps? It's Paul. Welcome to the Portal Room. Tonight with us, as always, Christian. Welcome. Hope you're
Hey,
doing
brother.
good.
Yeah, on the mend. I'm still got all the sinus stuff going on, but I'm hanging in there.
Nice,
Glad to be here. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's what is it? What are we on today? What day of the week are we on? We're on Wednesday. We're halfway there.
Yes, sir.
Well, tonight's gonna be pretty cool. We've been wanting this guest on for a good minute. Good friend of the show, good friend of the UFO Twitter universe, and all around good dude in general. So yeah, we got tonight host of the All Things Unexplained podcast, and I also want to say was a part of the Beast Games, Mr. Beast's show. He was contestant 718. So without further ado, we got Dr. Mounce in the house.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate this. That was an awesome introduction, by the way.
Had to throw in the Mr. Beast thing, man. Heck yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely a part of my lore now, and it was really interesting. And I actually brought along my audition video, which nobody has actually seen except some close friends. So if you want to watch that at some point tonight,
yes,
I brought it along.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Well, let's get into the origin of Dr. Mounce and what got you interested in UFOs and researching it, and how you got your podcast going, and yeah, your whole backstory. If you can give us the outline, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, that's a great question, and honestly, I got my interest in the unexplained, I think, as a child, watching television and listening to the radio. I think a lot of people can say that. A lot of people I've met have been like that. For me, do y'all remember the show In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy? It was a classic. In every episode, they went after Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or aliens, UFOs and stuff. So that show was just a classic for me. And then we had Unsolved Mysteries that came along shortly after that. My favorite episodes of Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, R.I.P., were the unexplained ones, the paranormal ones. They had a lot of missing person cases and murders and things like that. And I liked all those. But my absolute favorite was, Bigfoot or alien abduction or something like that, and Unsolved Mysteries was fantastic. And Unsolved Mysteries has been revived on Netflix. If you haven't checked that out, I encourage you to, because it's really outstanding. They do a great job of making it new, but yet also paying tribute to the episodes that came before. They even have a great tribute to the original music and to Robert Stack in the intro. So I really am a big fan of the new Unsolved Mysteries, and a lot of people that are what I'm not going to say my age, but it's probably closer to my ACDC jersey number here than you guys are to it. But a lot of people my middle aged have said that just like me, X-Files was transformative for them, that it really got them interested in the topic, in the phenomenon. And, you know, at its core, X-Files was about aliens and UFOs. Sure, they had a lot of other great episodes, but at its core, it was always about aliens and UFOs and the government conspiracy to cover it up, and Roswell and abductions and on and on and on, right? The Smoking Man was in there. It was amazing. And y'all, I used to hang with a group of people, and this is going to date me a little bit. So when season 1 came out, we had an X-Files club, a little nerdy, right? But it would come on Sunday nights, and it wasn't like it is now, right? Like you had to tune in live on television, or that was it, right? And you may not get it in reruns, and you could never guarantee if a rerun would come out or when, right? So we would get together on Sunday nights. I think it came out at 8 o'clock on Fox, and we would watch X-Files. And it was like the thing to do, right? Like we really looked forward to doing that. And season 1, those first few seasons were just outstanding. And I've talked to so many people that said, you know what? Yeah, X-Files. That's where I got fascinated with the topic, and they never looked back, and they never stopped looking into the topic. And then finally, for me, I've also got several friends that are just like this. Coast to Coast AM was a transformative event in their lives. As far as I know, it's the longest running radio show in the world. It still comes on. I'm on the East Coast, so it's difficult for me to listen now, and I have 2 little kids, and it's quite difficult. But I remember growing up, you know, again, just to date myself, like at some point during the night, all I had to do was turn on the radio and scan the AM dial and see what I could pick up. Sometimes it was like, you know, random baseball games from across the country, or, you know, who knows what. But I would always be able to pick up Coast to Coast AM. I'll never forget listening to Art Bell and George Norrie and those guys, and just classic things. It was dramatic, you know. It was like the old school days. There's a station on Sirius XM called Radio Classics, and they play these old school radio shows, you know, before televisions came out. It was a lot like that, right? Like, and hello, I want to say shout out to all the people I see, my friends in the chat, Arden, and I see Marie and lots of other people on there.
Shout out.
Yeah. But, and thanks for joining us. But yeah, Art Bell was incredible. And, you know, like you can't get any more dramatic than some dude calling in, and you could call in, right? And I think that was pretty novel. That kind of set it apart. You could call in the middle of the night and talk about crazy things. And one guy called in one night, you know, and he said he's on an airplane and he's about to fly into Area 51. Like, for a kid listening to the radio in the night, it doesn't get any more harrowing than that.
So mysterious. Yeah, it's so mysterious. You're like, what's happening?
Radio. I'm like, what the heck is Area 51? You know, so you really had to start digging into it. And by the way, you had to be serious to dig into those topics back then, because it's not like you could just Google it, right? So how do you figure out what the heck Area 51 was in the middle of the night, you know? So you learned about these mysterious, unexplained topics listening to Coast AM. And I also, you know, once we started our podcast, and shout out to my co-hosts Smitty and CJ who do the podcast with me, but we literally tried to emulate Coast AM. I really liked their style, and it's kind of surreal for me because doing my podcast, All Things Unexplained, I've had the great fortune to have some of the same guests on with us that I listened to a long time ago on Coast AM, like Travis Walton. Okay, I grew up, I heard Travis Walton on Coast AM. I watched Fire in the Sky, right? I was fascinated by his story. And to prep for the Travis Walton episode, you know, we listened, I'm pretty sure it was the Art Bell interview, but it might have been George Norrie. But we listened to that interview with Travis Walton because sometimes we like to differentiate ourselves if somebody's been on another podcast very recently, right? Like we don't want to just rehash the same stuff. But I thought, first of all, this episode happened like 30-something years ago, which is wild. Second of all, this is gold. Like you can't do it any better than this. So I'm like, you know what? The same exact question that they led off with Travis, let's lead off with that same exact question too. And you know what? It was the right move. It was like basically like, hey, tell us about that night. We just dove right in. And we've used that technique with a lot of guests that we have on, especially when they're there for a specific reason with the story to tell. And we got that from Coast to Coast AM because that seemed to be the style of Art Bell and George Norrie. Like, hey, let's just get right into it.
Yeah, it's a good format, right? It opens up the conversation right away. And then it's easier to get comfortable a lot quicker too, instead of just skating across like the baseline questions. But yeah, I'm glad that you're here again, and it's so funny hearing your little X-Files watching parties, like the old school Netflix and chill. It's so it's too funny, man.
I know, like I said, I didn't want to date myself, but I mean, heck, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have internet, computers, and that actually, that's one of the things I actually most enjoyed about Beast Games, and I had a hard time coming back to reality. But at Beast Games, I got completely disconnected. I was utterly off the grid. No cell phone, no internet. I didn't know what time of day it was. I didn't really know where I was at, to be honest, half the time. And it was tough for some people going through that at the beginning. On it, and I was telling somebody this other day, you know what happened? A very interesting phenomenon happened for me, because like I kind of got known in B City, like I was the dude that just slept outside every night. Like I would just go and crash outside there. We had couches, and it was kind of a dystopian society they had set up. I'd go crash on the couch. The weather was awesome. I'd just sleep outside. But this phenomenon happened to me where after I was there for a certain amount of time, I felt like I was becoming the best version of myself. And I can't say exactly why that is, but I do believe it had something to do with getting disconnected from my screens, from the news, from television, from Twitter.
It was a recharge. Yeah,
exactly.
You
it was
returned to
recharging
ground.
myself, well, with nature, not to be too, tree huggery or anything, but I was recharging myself with the natural world and with human interaction. I think, you asked about us, how my podcast got started, and we really started during March of 2020, which for a lot of people, they'll always remember that specific date because that was when COVID erupted. Okay. And my friends Smitty and CJ and I, we'd always talked about starting a podcast. And when COVID hit, all of a sudden it was like, okay, our kids aren't going to school. We're not going to work. And out of nowhere, all this video conferencing software like Zoom just erupted out of nowhere. I don't remember any of these things existing before COVID. I'm sure they did, but my kindergartner definitely wasn't doing Zoom meetings. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, yeah, they're doing Zoom meetings. I'm like, it's now or never. Plus, I don't know if y'all can remember, at that point, everybody was like doing it from their house, podcast, television shows, everything. And suddenly it became more real to not be perfect. It made you authentic, right? Like it made you relatable. And I said, hey, we can do this too. Like, look at so-and-so from ESPN or whatever. Like they can't figure out how to work their microphone. Remember the lawyer that couldn't get the cat emoji turned off when he reported to court? Yeah. I mean, so people struggled, right? I'm like, we can do this. We can do this good. And we weren't, it's not that we were that great, but we were so imperfect, I think, that it made us connect with our audience, and it made us be like, you know what, that they are genuine people. Look at them. They laugh together. They know each other. They're friends. They're not putting on a front. Like, this is really them. So yeah, that's how we got going during COVID. And like I said, we kind of tried to emulate Coast to Coast AM style. Because one thing I loved about Coast to Coast AM, and I think this sets us apart too, and you guys, I could say I really appreciate this about you guys too, is we don't tell people what to think, and we don't tell them what's going on, because I'll be honest, we don't know, and I don't think anybody tunes in to find out what we necessarily think. But we'll have guests on, and we'll treat them with respect and let them tell their stories. And I think it's treating your audience with respect to give them the authority and the dignity and the respect to say, you know what, you were smart enough to make up your own mind. Here is this person's story. You decide for yourself.
I mean, it's the most honest way you can be when it comes to having a show, really. I think being in a very opinionated format can really box a show, or the viewer or listener, whatever, and it leaves a lot of room for people to want to keep coming back if you don't kind of land on one ideology or a couple, right? You just kind of leave everything out in the open. I know Christian might even have something to say about that. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I just want to say it's great to have you on here, brother. Nicole, I watched your recent video on the pyramids, and I really appreciate, like I said, kind of how you're explaining your approach, where it's like you present the information, right? You know what I mean? And it's up for people to decide. It's not our call. It's really just up to us to give our experiences as well as the information that we've come across, right? And if need be, maybe give some insight from our personal perspective on it, but not to try to tell people what's going on, because I personally feel like that's a silly thing to try to do, right? You know what I mean? So, but you do an amazing job, and you really you brought so many facts to the table. And actually, what do you call it? I bought one of your T-shirts. It's on the way. I wish I would have had it now to wear on the stream. You know what I mean? Because it's awesome, and you do a great job. So yeah, guys, we're going to link All Things website in the video as well, because he's got some really great merch that I think the community would probably like. But yeah, man. So I want to ask you personally, what do you call it? What brought you kind of to the UFO X area? What brought you to like the UFO X community in general? Was it did you have like an experience that you kind of wanted to share? Did you feel like it was a platform that you could really get involved with disclosure on? I'm just curious. I'm always curious about that.
Well, that's a good question. And I think it goes back to my podcast. I'm not an experiencer, although I have seen things I can't explain. And so I guess that makes me an experiencer on some level, right? And I was lucky enough to get to see some things with my son, right? Like he's really, and my daughter too, they're really into watching the skies and Bigfoot. That's really kind of how I started dipping my toes in all this. I wrote, my kids, this was right before COVID. I had two little kids and I was reading them lots of books, and I'm like, man, some of these books are the worst. So one night I said, you know what? I want to write some children's books that I like, and I think my kids will dig them. So I actually wrote some Bigfoot themed children's books, and one of them, yeah, and y'all may not know that about me, but I can show you one of them. Let's see. Yeah, right here.
Is it this
That's
one
awesome,
right
by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Love
Yeah.
that.
So here's
Bigfoot. That's awesome.
Yeah, so here's Bigfoot Pickleball. It's one of my Bigfoot themed children's books, and this was a bestseller on Amazon and a top Amazon new release at the time. And I like to say it's the first Bigfoot pickleball book for children, and it is.
So
it really
awesome.
is.
Yeah,
and so
so unique.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's
And I'm
really
kind of
cool.
into health and fitness as well, and sports, and so I just kind of combined lots of things I enjoy into this, right? And yeah, so like, I could show you a few of my other books here from this. I got Bigfoot, Halloween Party, and a book called Let's Play Tennis, which is
It's
about
awesome.
some a family of Bigfoots.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks. And so these have done pretty good. I'm also a narrator, and so I'll share. Let's see, I'll switch to this tab. So on Audible, yeah, there we go. I've got some books on Audible. So, for example, I narrate Killer Kudzu, which was written
Wow.
by Julius Thompson, but you can see they're narrated by Dr. M. Timothy Mounce, which is me. And
I love
look,
it.
it's got 4.9 there, Killer Kudzu. And so
Wow.
I've got several books on Audible that I narrate.
So
And
now I
so,
see why they call you doctor. There
yeah,
you go.
that's right. And so that was one of the best things I ever did, because when I started writing those books, I briefly considered doing a pen name, like not my real identity. But I was encouraged, you know what, you should just go ahead and call it yourself, Dr. Seuss. And a lot of people don't realize this about me. I do have a PhD, and I'm also a professor, a college professor. And so I was like, okay, I love Dr. Seuss. I'm just gonna say I'm Dr. Mounce, like that's me, right? And so that has become my identity. That's what I'm known as with writing my books and on Audible as well. And it's become my name for the podcast. That got me going into it was the Bigfoot and my books and things. But when I started the podcast, it made me realize something. At first, when I got going on it, guys, Paul and Christian, I thought, you know what? I can't wait to meet some of these people I've always wanted to talk to, and these like Travis Walton, Brandon Fugel, others. And I really want to create. I am a creator. That was my point of sharing the books and the narrated books on Audible, is that I'm a creator, not necessarily an experiencer. So when I started creating this podcast, I'm like, well, I'm just going to try to throw something out there. People may listen to it. Hopefully they'll enjoy it. But one thing I realized when I first started, I thought, all things unexplained. The unexplained are the events, like the Bigfoot sighting, okay, or the UFO sighting, for example. But we all came to realize, Smeedy and CJ and myself, there was a other side of that coin. All Things Unexplained wasn't just about the events. It was also about the people involved in those events. We couldn't help but wonder at some point, right? Like when we talked to these folks, like they believed they were abducted by aliens. This profoundly changed their lives. And now, we had one lady on with us. She saw a Tic Tac UFO in Great Britain, England. And this reminds me of the pyramid story. Her story, and she took some photographs of it, and they went viral, right? And that ran across the world, like in all kinds of news outlets, got picked up by the AP, etc. We had her on our show. But we quickly discovered, hey, there's a whole lot to the story they didn't talk about at all. Like, for example, she believes herself to be a Pleiadian starseed, right? And we had all these Pleiadian starseeds that tuned in to that show with her to talk about her Tic Tac sighting. I'm like, dang, they didn't mention anything about that in the news. None of these interviews, they all just they did one short interview and ran it across the world, right? Nobody else dug into it whatsoever. Nobody else even talked to her except us when we had her on. And we discovered so much more about her. So I really got fascinated in the people involved in these unexplained events and how they have these real events and they are profoundly changed after that. And it made me wonder, because I would wonder sometimes, like, this person, what moments in their life led to them becoming what they are today, right? And the answers to this day have not ceased to fascinate me. And one thing I love about the Bigfoot world is I love how they have conferences and festivals and things. I've told people this before, and I think it's awesome to get to go and fellowship with people in real life. And it's not necessarily about the Bigfoot, right? Like I like to say this on my show. I like to end the shows by saying, get out there and look at the skies and head out to the woods, like disconnect from your screens and stuff. You may not see a UFO and you may not spot Bigfoot, but you might find yourself out there. And to me, that's what UFO Twitter is like. There are some amazing people there that I've met. I have hosted some other UFO podcasters here at my house, at my home, right? I've been fortunate enough to meet some of the people from UFO Twitter in real life. And the thing is, like, I want them to know, and I think I've kind of proven this, like, I'm a real person, right? Like, I don't really hide myself or anything about myself. I just put myself out there, right? Like, this is me. And I interact with UFO Twitter on a genuine level. And I'm the same way within UFO Twitter as I try to be on my podcast. Like, and I think that I see Screen, hey Screen, and Mac, thanks Mac. I think they can attest to this. Like, they've never seen me be rude or disrespectful or belligerent in
I
UFO
agree.
Twitter, right? I mean, I think it's easy to do that because you're kind of anonymous. You don't really see each other like we do right now, right? You don't necessarily know. You don't know if this is the real name of someone you're talking to or not, for example. I, in my real life, am the same person that I am on my podcast and within UFO Twitter. I have kids. I have a professional career. I have real life responsibilities. And I think for the most part in real life, I think we can all agree it's not a good idea to be belligerent and rude and disrespectful. Like, that doesn't, in my opinion, really happen in the real world. And so it shouldn't happen in UFO Twitter. And I've kind of gravitated towards the people like you guys that I see. Like, they're intellectual, they're academic, they're curious, but most of all, they're polite and genuine and respectful. That was a long answer. I'm sorry about that.
No, absolutely. No, you're right. I think that's
That's great.
a huge
Perfect.
aspect of why I think we started to kind of come over this way, right, Paul? You know what I mean? To kind of remove
Yeah.
ourselves away from that because it is it's the Wild West over there. You know what I mean? And you do have to find the people that are actually genuine on there that don't that aren't trying to, you know, or at least aren't rude. You know what I mean? So I get that. I wanted to say really quickly because I did see this in the chat, and I think it's a very good question. If that's all right, Paul, that Parsi put in there.
Yeah.
He asked the question about how exactly do you explain the phenomena to your children when most of us can barely comprehend their own experiences? How do you go about doing that yourself?
That's a great question. You know what? One thing I do, I don't hide it. You know, I don't hide my love for the unexplained. Like I said, I wrote children's books about Bigfoot for them, and we read them, you know, together. And we even have this little thing, right? And my daughter's great at this. And one of my greatest accomplishments of my life is I won a Bigfoot calling contest in Crossville, Tennessee at the Crossville, Tennessee Bigfoot
Awesome.
Festival. Yeah, I know. And my kids, like, we can be in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood kind of echoes. Like, we kind of sit at the bottom of almost a mountain, and it echoes here. And my daughter, like, she can ride her bike now, and she's fast. She can get away from me quick, but I can whoop, right? Like my Bigfoot call. And even if I can't see her, she'll whoop back, right? Like, she'll hear me and she'll whoop back. So we've developed this technique, right? And but to them it's a fun and game, but they also know, like, if we ever faced an emergency situation, and we have had these things arise, like, this could really save us in an emergency situation if the kids got away from me, or if I lost them, or they, you know, if they lost me, that sort of thing. So one thing, I just lay it out there, and to me, that I don't try to hide it, and that, you know, sparks their genuine interest in it. But I'm so proud of my kids. They're smart, they're curious, they're really academic and intelligent. They're really into the things at school. You know, like my son's on the quiz bowl team, for example, but he does all these sports, etc. He's got, like, all of my best traits, but none of my worst traits. Like, this, that's the amazing thing about kids. It's really interesting. But I don't hide my love for academics. I consider myself an academic, and we love to talk about science. And I approach with them the paranormal through the academic scientific aspects. Okay, like we'll go out and watch the skies, right? And we'll talk about, well, like my son spotted something one night while we were looking for the comet. Remember the comet that was out not too long ago? And he turned around, he's like, what is that? Is that a comet too? And nobody else was looking at it. And we turned around and holy moly, it was incredible. It was the Falcon 9, as it turns out. But that was way more fascinating than the comet. And so we learned about the Falcon 9, we learned about the comet. But then one night my son spotted, these unexplained objects in the sky, and we just talked about what they could be. So I talk about it at dinner, with them, UFOs, aliens. They have a lot of great theories on all that stuff. But, we also go to church. I grew up religious, so we know that there's a religious component as well, or at least I believe that. One of my favorite guests on our podcast was Eric Bard from Skinwalker Ranch, and he's a scientist. And I really loved what he's trying to do. He believes that it's all connected. And you know what? I do too. And he's literally trying to come up with a theory of everything, a theory that connects the dots between the paranormal and the scientific, the quantum realm, the macro realm in terms of the universe, the planets, etc., and religion, the superstitious, the unexplained, metaphysics. He believes it's all connected, and I do too. And I treat it that way with my kids. Now, I admit I don't get into some of these darker aspects with them because some of it can be kind of disturbing. But I know that when those things do come up at some point in their lives, they'll have the background to be prepared to handle it in the right way.
Totally agree. That's a great answer. What do you call it? And I agree. Like, I feel the same way about kind of like the darker aspects of stuff. I think I said this before, I wouldn't walk into my son before he goes to bed and say, watch out for the astral, spirit entities that are going to try to get at you in your sleep. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I feel our consciousness kind of maybe even acts as a barrier for that if it isn't introduced in a way. So it's like our perception of reality can stay the same. And doesn't allow some of these things to bleed through unless there's a specific moment for it. But I think Eric is taking quite a huge undertaking there, trying to find all the connections as far as that's concerned, because I agree. I think it is all connected as well. But I think trying to prove that scientifically I think maybe that's probably the Holy Grail, and that's a big undertaking. So.
No, you're right, but in my opinion, they're doing it the right way, and I really like the folks at Skinwalker Ranch, and having talked to many of them on our podcast. And the amazing thing about them is that a lot of the guests on our podcast will talk to us for quite a while afterwards too. And I always thought, man, that's really great. Like Eric Bard, I think he told us after the show, I think he has like 6, 7, 8 kids. He has like a ton of kids, and he said, you know what? This is my job. Like, I'm here working. I'm here collecting data. Like, this is my livelihood too. He said, sometimes people ask me about it. He's like, yeah, like I've got a lot of kids. They're not cheap, right? Like they got to go to college one day, and I intend to put them all through college. And so the thing he's doing, I think is right, is he's out there putting in field work. He's out there collecting data. Okay. And one of the things I like about him is the same thing I like about Kevin Knuth, astrophysicist, right? And who we were lucky enough to have on. And that is that Kevin Knuth also, he collects data and he considers it all data, right? Like he doesn't ignore any aspects, right? Like if some aspect of it is an abduction, he doesn't ignore that. He still considers it in the field of data. And I think that's very important because I do think that's the only way that you're ever going to really get to the truth.
Absolutely. I wanted to maybe backtrack just a little bit here. Let's go back to maybe a little bit of some of the fun stuff when you were talking about the Beast game stuff. So how did you get into that? I know you've told this story before, but for all the people who haven't, how did you get into that? And then I know you actually mentioned or brought up UFOs with Mr. Beast, if I'm not mistaken, too. So that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, for sure. Mr. Beast really is into UFOs, and it's kind of weird. I had tried to get Mr. Beast on the podcast before, And it's actually really good that he never responded, because if he had, I might have been ineligible to go on Beast Games. But for me, and because, you know, another reason we tried to get him on, because he's also very philanthropic, but he's also, and I've learned more about this after meeting him, he's just a dude. He's just a dude from the middle of North Carolina, and I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So he, along with all these other people, which is very synchronistic, are just right down the road from me. Like Diana Pasulka's down the road, and Chris Bledsoe's down the road. I could go on and on and on, right? It's kind of weird. But he's just down the road in Greenville, North Carolina. Is where he got his start. And he's just a dude that started making YouTube videos. And look, poof, he's a billionaire now, essentially, right? So he's a pretty fascinating character. They say his house there is just like a normal house. You wouldn't know that a billionaire necessarily lives there. Yeah, shout out to Greenville and ECU. He used to just get people from ECU, like college students, to, you know, do his videos and stuff. But yeah, would y'all like to see my audition video? And then I can tell you.
Yes.
I should preface.
Absolutely.
I should preface this video, and it's back on my tab. Let me see. I might have to pull it back up, but I'll preface this video. It was last July. Share screen. Yeah, here we go. And Paul, you may have to pull that up for me. It just says Dr. Mounce again. But it was last July, and my son, who was 9 at the time, and I knew he liked Mr. Beast. He's like, you know what, Dad? Mr. Beast, he's about to have this new TV show, and it's going to be the biggest show, the biggest game show in history. It's going to have 1,000 people on it, and it's going to have the biggest prize in television history, $5 million. I kind of thought he was probably wrong about that, but I should have known, so I Googled it real quick, and I'm like, oh, man, he's right. It is supposed to be 1,000 contestants competing for $5 million. And as it turns out, when I got to the show to film it, and none of us really knew this, it was 2,000 of us. It wasn't just 1,000, it was 2,000 of us. So
Wow.
yeah, I know. And that was pretty crazy, right?
Wow.
And so I, just as a joke, I'm like, you know what? I should apply for that, just as a joke. And I made this audition video. This was last July. And a week later, my phone rang, and it was Los Angeles, California. So, of course, I denied it. I just, no, I'm not answering it. Los Angeles, California, sorry, I'm not available. I grew up in Mississippi, in case you couldn't tell, right? So New York calls or LA calls, I'm like, nah, block. And then I got a text message from the same number, and I got another call, and it was a producer for Beast Games. And he's like, hey, you want to be on Beast Games? I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's do this. And then about 2 weeks later, I was flying out to Las Vegas to go into the complete unknown. I had no idea what I was going to be doing. None of us did. And 2 weeks later, there's 2,000 of us living in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas on the field. It was wild. It was crazy, but I know. But here's my audition video, and let's see if I can make it. I'll just play it here. Hey, Mr. Beast, my name is Tim Mounce. I'm 49 years young, and I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Oh, shoot, I shouldn't have said my age. 49 years young. Meals by day, I'm Dr. Mounce, professor of bowling. That's right, bowling, inspiring young minds and sharing knowledge. I'm also the author of books like Bigfoot Pickleball. That's right, the world's first pickleball children's book. And I'm a narrator of books like Killer Kudzu on Audible. Don't worry, it'll grow on you. And I host a podcast all about UFOs and the unexplained, where I get to talk to awesome people like Brandon Fugel and Patricia Cornwell.
Well, don't we love things that are unexplained, right?
And when I'm not chasing Bigfoot or UFOs, you can find me on the sand volleyball court, spiking my way to victories. I'm ready for the most insane, unhinged, and surprising twist that Beast Games have to offer. Let's make history together. See you soon, Mr. Beast. Beast.
Love it. That was
Thanks,
so
good.
dude. I would have called too if I was the producer. I'd have been like, yeah, get this guy right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I made a pretty good video, I thought, and I'm kind of odd and quirky. You know, I got some quirky things about me, and my hair was weird and stuff, and the hair actually really helped me out. The mohawk or faux hawk or however it was, it helped me out in the game show, because it's impossible to suddenly be surrounded by 1,999 other people and meet them all and get to know them. But one thing that happened was, whether I met them or not, if they saw me, they remembered me, right? And then later they would come up to introduce themselves to me, like they would remember me, like, I saw you, saw your head, walking by me on the field. And being there, it was just so surreal. I survived the first 1,000 cuts in Las Vegas. I was super proud of that. I had some insane moments on there. I was living on the field for a little over a week there. I lost 10 pounds. We barely ate. I didn't change clothes the whole time. I didn't shower. But at some point, I was just like, whatever. I'm good. Let's do this. It was incredible. It was an amazing experience. And it was only just, it kind of came in a chain reaction for me, guys. So I've had kind of what I would call 2 keystone moments in my life so far. And one was March 2020 when COVID happened, but then that spawned our podcast, right? And I don't think I would have gotten on Beast Games if it hadn't been for the podcast. But then also, I decided March of last year, I'm like, you know what? I keep talking about all these things. And one of the irony of, and you guys know what I'm talking about here, one of the cruel ironies of doing a podcast or creating content is that you are constantly stuck behind a screen creating content about the things you really like, but you're not out there actually engaging in those things. And so, I read American Cosmic by Diana Pasulka, and I don't know, I felt drawn to go to New Mexico. And so last March, I just booked a trip to New Mexico. I'm like, I'm going. I actually invited some people from UFO Twitter, but none of them got to go. But I invited them. But I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's going to happen. But I went out there, and I had been corresponding with someone who, let's just say, is very knowledgeable in the UFO topic. And I got out there, and I got the chance to meet them, and they were really kind and really giving to me. And then I ended up doing a podcast out there from a coffee shop. And it was with my friends at Calling All Beings. That was a surreal moment, too, because a lot of interesting people on that show. Kelly Chase was on that show. She was one of the guests. And she actually bought one of my books, so I'll always be grateful to Kelly for buying Bigfoot Pickleball live on there. And and some other people came through the chat that were very interesting. Lou Elzondo, for some reason, popped in the chat that night. And then my friend, after the podcast, he came in. He's like, hey, you want to go to the crash site? And I'm not going to say which crash site, but there's only a few in New Mexico. It's pretty well known. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. He's like, okay, is that your car out there? And I was in a crowd rental car. It's like, well, we got to take 2 vehicles. So you're going to have to drive that one, because just vehicles out there have a tendency to suddenly stop working. And so just for safety, you're going to meet us out there. And he pulled up Google Maps on his phone, and he zoomed in. He's like, you see this abandoned facility? There's an abandoned facility that he showed me. I'm like, yeah. He's like, meet us here tomorrow morning. And so I did. And y'all, it was like a scene out of Breaking Bad. I'm not lying. Next day, I'm driving 2 hours out to the middle of the desert.
In the middle of the desert. Yeah.
Middle of the desert. It was like, I just met this person, and I didn't know who they were bringing with them. He's like, I'm going to have some other people with me. And I get to the site, no self-service. I walk out into the desert until I get barely a signal, and I send my coordinates to some friends just in case. I'm like, I don't know if I'm making it out of here. And luckily, eventually they were running late, but they did show up. And they even had someone that was from the Discovery Channel with them. That was very, I could not have predicted that, right? And then we go down the dirt road, and we get to this cattle gate, okay? And then I hop out, open the cattle gate, and then we head out into the wild blue desert yonder, right? A cattle path. That's all we're on at this point. And I'm stopping every once in a while. I bought work gloves at Lowe's, and I'm chunking boulders out of the path, and I'm picking up these like weird plants. They weren't cacti, but they were something. It's like, yeah, they can flatten the tires. So I'm chunking those out of the way. And I ended up out there at the crash site. And y'all, that was transformative for me. And we had metal detectors. And I actually found something out there. We found two things out there, two anomalous metallic objects. And I actually brought mine with me here. I don't know if
Wow.
Ooh, wow.
now, mine doesn't look quite as anomalous as the other person's find. The other person's thing that they found has ended up on some documentaries. I'll just put it that way. And on some
Wow.
you've probably seen, but I can't say more about that. This is
Right.
not. Now, I'll admit, this could be an old nail or something, but I've been told that it's still worth having analyzed at some point because you never know what could come out of this.
Right.
And I've had offers from astrophysicists, y'all, off the record, that found out about it, and they want to analyze it, and they actually wanted to analyze it with, and they said someone else that's well known in the UFO scientific field, and I was shocked because I didn't know they had any connection, this astrophysicist and this scientist who we know studies UFOs. But he's like, yeah, we're working together, and they're studying crash retrieval parts right now, and we would love to have a look at it, but you can't mail it to us. He said we've had this happen before. We get the mail and it's already been opened and the contents have been removed. And he said, this astrophysicist said to me, but we are planning a trip to Chris Bledsoe's property. Maybe we can meet up there and you can give it to us at Chris Bledsoe's property. So that blew my mind that this astrophysicist, right, was heading to Fayetteville, North Carolina to visit
That's crazy.
Bledsoe. Now, I don't know. I don't think they've made it yet, and I haven't had the chance to go down there yet to make that exchange. But all of a sudden, for me, this started this wild chain of events. Like, next thing I know, I'm out there in the desert. Just me deciding to go right to New Mexico. I'm out there in the desert. I'm at a crash site. I didn't plan on that happening. Somebody from the Discovery Channel is out there. We all, by the way, everybody out there ended up on a documentary or a television show of some sort. This was not planned. This was just synchronicity in action. I don't know how it all happened, but it did. Later, we ended up, guys. So if you know Patricia Cornwell, y'all saw her in my video. Her latest book is Identity Unknown. This was a #1 Times New York bestseller. Identity Unknown. The words are backwards there. But this is actually, y'all love this. The character who dies, because all our books are forensic mysteries, the character who dies is a very Avi Loeb-like physicist who seems to have been killed by a UFO. So that's how the book starts.
Oh, wow.
Wild.
Us in her book on page 164 and says that we're her favorite podcast, or the main character's favorite podcast, along with Ancient Aliens, the television show. So that was very surreal for that to happen. This is Identity Unknown. It was a #1 Times New York Times bestseller. And like I said, COVID and then me deciding to go to New Mexico, it just seemed to cause this chain reaction of synchronicity for me that has spiraled into all these other things. And I'm just riding the wave, guys.
That seems so intuitive of you, though, to just spontaneously want to go out there. It's like you said, it's a synchronicity. It's like perfect timing.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
crazy, man.
Well, yeah,
Screen says something in the chat too, really quick. I just wanted to drop. I think he makes a good point. He said, don't let it out of your sight and make sure that it's not putting out above normal radiation levels if you're handling it. Yeah, it might just could be on the safe side, suppose. You know what I mean? Because it could, right? Or did you have it analyzed?
No, I haven't yet. I mean, it's just put away here. Hopefully one day I can hand it over to these scientists to have it analyzed. Like my friend said, it may not be extraterrestrial, but it might help prove another piece of the crash site story. Like it might help prove the Army's involvement, for example. There's rumors the Army came out there and, quote, seeded the crash site with nails and other debris to make it more difficult for people in the future to discover anything else out there, right? That there's rumors about that. There's rumors about other things happening out there. So it could help, even if it's not from a UFO, it could help prove other pieces of the story, which is a very important thing, to do.
Absolutely. I kind of, it made me think when you showed me that piece, how a lot of retrieval pieces that, or at least from stories I've heard of, I'm sure Screen there in the chat might know a little more about this, but about like what they call angel hair, right? Like these, I guess it's like part of the craft, right? Like it's like it breaks apart whenever the craft crashes or whatever. So I'm wondering if it might be something like that. I don't know. Who knows?
Well, it could be. And I'm going to give y'all a recommendation, guys. And I had developed a theory about where I wanted to look for something if I got a chance to go out there. And my theory was I discovered, someone told me that, there in that particular site, they have these floods every year. Like it's a desert, but they have this massive flooding every year. And I thought to myself, okay, and by the way, they also said, it's also not like you picture, it's not just flat desert terrain. It's actually quite hilly with ravines and things like that, right? From all the floods. And in my mind, my theory was, I'm going to explore the backside of one of these ravines, because I could picture the debris at some point washing up and then washing over the side of a ravine and becoming embedded in the side of the ravine. And you also have the situation where animals could move debris pieces around, and you have rattlesnake holes and holes with other animals and things in it, ants moving things, that sort of thing. So I said, well, I really want to investigate the side of one of these ravines, somewhere that's not quite super easy for a human to get to, but where a piece could become lodged and kind of sit there for a while, kind of be impervious to future flooding, like coming over the top of that, And that's where I found it, was on the side of one of those ravines with the metal detector. And and I thought that was pretty interesting. I want to give a shout out. I almost forgot. Another thing that led me out there, in this book, I highly recommend. It's called UFO Crash Site at San Agustin. And this takes place in the plains of San Agustin. The author is Art Campbell, and the subtitle here, get this, is Isotopic Metal Analysis Not of This Earth. Now, I'm fascinated by Art Campbell. I'm actually working on a book right now, and I have a lot of tribute to Art Campbell in our book. And the book is, I could tell you more about it later if we get into it, but it should be out soon. Well, Art Campbell spent years in the New Mexico desert, literally years, in the plains of San Agustin, which, by the way, is the same site that Diana Pasulka and Gary Nolan were taken to by Tim Taylor, the plains of San Agustin. Okay, Art Campbell was out there well before them, and he was digging out there for years. He had indigenous people, local people even helping him at some point. And this book is chock full of his findings, pictures, like it says, isotopic metal analysis data. It's not a fun read because it's scientific, y'all. It is chock full of data and findings. UFO crash site at San Agustin. And Art Campbell has unfortunately passed away. I felt so bad for him. I saw he was giving a talk at a library one time, and he had some of his artifacts there with him. Y'all, he believes he discovered an organ, a literal alien organ, and had it sent to one of the top cardiologists in the country. That's in here. The picture of that organ. He discovered filaments like angel hair, like you were talking about, Paul. He discovered shards of all kinds of things. And he said in that talk, he said, You know what? I'm kind of fed up with the UFO community. I've got there it is. I've got all these artifacts here that I've discovered, and I can't even get anybody to come out here and look at it. And he just sounded defeated and brokenhearted. But that inspired me too. Like, I just felt drawn. Something about Art Campbell's story, and then reading American Cosmic. I just said to myself, you know what? I got to get out there. I got to put my boots on the ground. I don't know what I'm going to find or what's going to happen, but something is pulling me out there.
That's crazy, man. Would you say it? So I, I don't even want to ask the question I was going to ask. I was going to say, well, do you think that it kind of inspired you to work on some of these projects and then this book you're talking about? But obviously, that's a yes. So it seems like things around this topic seem to pull you in, but from different aspects of your life, which is, it's pretty incredible, to be honest, man. I really, I like seeing this angle for people who are interested in this topic, not just on this crazy roller coaster paranormal ride. This is more like curiosity meets reality, you know, and like you're kind of, in a sense, it seemed like over time, like you've felt a calling to certain projects and certain things, and then they just, I don't know, maybe that's like the what is it, the law of attraction or something, right? It kind of feels that way.
Yeah, you're probably on to something there. I mean, we discovered this, like, I had heard the UFO topic called a rabbit hole before I started doing my podcast. And by the way, my co-hosts were much more skeptical than I was. CJ, I kind of compared her to Scully from X-Files. She was my Scully, and I was the Mulder. Okay, I was very open-minded. She was, let's just say, not. But our first guest, Smitty, found him. He was an elderly man in Mississippi, and he was an experiencer, an eyewitness of one of the most well-documented UFO sightings in history. It happened in Flora, Mississippi. Over a dozen law enforcement officers in the 70s watched and tracked a UFO across rural Mississippi. Okay, and he didn't want to use his real name. He only went by Mr. Billy, and we only got to talk to him on the telephone. But y'all, when he started speaking, it changed all of us, because, like CJ said, she just thought it was going to be some crazy person telling this fantastical story. But instead, when he started speaking, she thought he sounded just like her grandfather, telling her a real, genuine story that changed his life. And she could not help but find him 100% believable and authentic. And he was. And we all saw how deeply moved he was by this event. You know, that's another reason I don't give people a hard time, experiencers a hard time, and I don't condone it. I don't like that, and I shy away from that. Whether you believe their story is too fantastical to be true or not, you take somebody like Mr. Billy, they had absolutely no motivation to make this up. It has literally done nothing but essentially ruin their lives. They were made fun of. They're too embarrassed to share their real names. They lost friends. They, in some cases, got disowned by family members. They got divorces. You name it. They had no monetary gain from this whatsoever. They got harassed by law enforcement, by other people, by the press. They got threatened. The sheriff who was involved in that incident, he got a call from the CIA. And the CIA said, we advise you not to say anything about this. And he actually asked Mr. Billy, you know, what would you do? And he's like, hey, I would do what they say. There's no good reason for these people to make any of this up. And Mr. Billy had been experiencing these sightings for quite a long time there and had never been able to tell anybody about it until one night this erupted with all of them watching, right? And so that really changed the way we all looked at the phenomenon and the people that experience it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that
absolutely.
I think this is what you're talking about right here, right? This is right here, cop car, UFO, 1970s. I believe this is the one, right? Evening of February 10th, 1977. Is this the one?
Yep, that's it.
Flora. That's crazy.
Yeah, and and they just sat there and watched it and tracked it across the countryside. And Mr. Billy, everybody knew he had a camera. He had got this new camera, and they came and got him. He was at home. They said, "Hey, Billy, grab that camera you were telling us about, and let's go." And so, citizens saw it. That there were sheriffs there, there were highway patrolmen there, watching it, and then of course, I mean, it was just totally believable. It completely changed everything for us, everything. And then, like I read about this Art Campbell, he was just a guy, and he kind of stumbled upon the story about this UFO crash at St. Augustine, and he kind of learned from the locals where it's at, and he became so fascinated by it. He just found that he had to get out there. But this is what I was telling you about the rabbit hole, right? Once I started digging into that story with Mr. Billy, you could never get to the bottom of it, ever. Right? It just kept going, and
Right.
one door after another opened. And then one book I'm fascinated by too is by, I'm sure you've heard of it, by General Corso, former Army colonel, and he
Yes.
wrote a book the day after Roswell, and it suffered its share of criticism, and maybe rightfully so. But the book, to me, is amazing how many things of it have come to pass that you can't disprove. Like, I'll give you a good example. One little piece of that book, I said, and this is in my particular skill set, right? I said, I'm going to hone in on this one little aspect. He talked about night vision, and he claimed it was reverse engineered alien technology. It's not that I'm a debunker or anything, but I think that, to get to the truth, sometimes it's okay in science to prove something wrong sometimes. That's how you get to the truth. And sometimes you have to try to prove something is wrong in mathematics and in science, right? So I said, this should be easy enough for me to look into. Y'all try to think of another piece of technology that we can't completely trace the provenance of, like this thing in my hand. Even I grew up in Mississippi, the freaking cotton gin, right? Like Eli Whitney, like we can pull up his diagrams and the complete and utter history of it. But y'all, I started digging into night vision goggles, and guess what? Nah, you ain't finding the provenance of that. Nope. All you can determine is probably Army R&D, military research and development, which is essentially what Corso said. It went right into that, labeled as that. And he described the phenomenon as this, and I found it to be so true. He described it that whatever the truth is, it's hidden in a box. And people start looking for that box. Okay? And before they can get to it, what I've come to call the UFO cabal, and I get that term from the man that was involved with the Malmstrom nuclear incident, Bob Salas, who came on the show with us. He called it the UFO cabal. And Corso said, before people can get to the truth, they take that box with the truth in it and they move it to another secret location. They put it inside of another box. Okay? And if somebody were to find that box, they'd have to discover the way to get into it and then get to the other box with the truth in it. But before they get to that one, they take both those boxes and move it to another secret location and put it inside of another box, another riddle that you have to get to the bottom of. And this happens over and over and over for decades, right? Until the truth is so buried in a bureaucracy and a cover-up and a conspiracy that there's almost no way to get to it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I think that gentleman was right about that as well. That's the way. I mean, that's how they've kept this secret for so long, right? We talk about, how it's like people are like, oh, it's like one of the best kept, secrets by the government. But you explained exactly how they keep it secret, is that you'll see something will happen, somebody will find it, they have to figure their way into the box, which is, like, here's this alien tech that I have no idea what it is. And they take it and they move it and put it into a new box as well. It's it's too perfect, and it's too easy, as well as the disinformation campaigns as well, um, and in just the ontological nature of what we're dealing with already. People don't want that to be like a like a something that enters into their atmosphere, I suppose, because it's heavy. Like, that's a heavy thing. So I think that they also bank on individuals not wanting that to be something real, if you catch what I mean by that, because it's much easier to kind of keep your perception in one, just in the physical, without anything extra in it. And as human beings, we take the path of least resistance. That's just how we are. So I think that kind of perfectly sums up exactly why we haven't had disclosure in any form, and why we won't, is because they will continue to move it. And I think that, with Grush coming on to the special task force, and him having these like the information of where these technologies are being stored, they were moved long before
Yes.
he said a word about it. You know what I mean? Like, these people know before you're going to do something you're going to do. It's really that simple. And I mean, it could even be traced back to like AI from way back when the government had it, is probable outcomes. It's very probable when somebody who is in a position of intelligence, uh, there's a probability factor that goes in with every single individual. And if there isn't, I think that our government would have no secrets at all. So we're experiencers and people who research this topic. That we're basically the disclosure. We are, and we're going to have to be. Otherwise, we're dealing with the box metaphor completely and totally.
Yeah, sometimes you might have extraterrestrial evidence in your hands, and you know what? It's still not necessarily that easy to prove anything. I'll use this thing I found in New Mexico as another example. This could be extraterrestrial, but it's like an astrophysicist told us. But guess what? The same elements exist across the entire universe. If this came from the other side of the universe, it's still made up of even the same isotopes as we already know about. So good luck. Good luck trying to prove to all of society that something even is extraterrestrial. Because guess what? That paper is going to be so thick and heavy and scientific, you're not going to convince everybody. And you're only going to be able to, at best, describe a hypothesis involving what you have discovered. I mean, it's not like the president's going to be coming out and saying, hey, aliens landed here or that sort of thing. I laugh because one of my favorite quotes from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he's been on kind of my, like poo list here lately, but still, he had a great quote one time because he finds it interesting that people complain about chemicals. Sometimes they read the labels of their food and they see all these chemicals and stuff in them. And he's like, part of the reason chemicals get a bum rap is because they have these really scary sounding complex names. But he's like, my best friends are made out of chemicals. So it's kind of a bum rap. But he also said we are all still made out of the same thing as the stars are. Like, we are all star matter. We are all star seeds, not from a woo perspective, but from a literal astrophysics perspective. And speaking of that, in comments, y'all see my AC/DC shirt? Best band in Australian history, in my opinion. But there was a movie, a Stephen King movie, and I love Stephen King. I love reading his novels. But y'all remember the Stephen King movie that had the best thing about it was the whole soundtrack was AC/DC, Maximum Overdrive, and it was about this
Oh, okay.
comet or something that kind of came over, and then all the vehicles and lawnmowers and stuff kind of got a life of their own, and nobody could explain it. And they're all like trying to kill people, but they need people to gas them up and everything. And I always thought it was funny because King, that he also produced that movie, and it was basically the only movie he ever produced. And somebody asked him one time, like, are you ever going to produce another movie? And he's like, have you seen Maximum Overdrive? It's like, nah, I'm not making another one. And the rumor is like he was basically addicted to cocaine at that time and other drugs, and that he was so high and so out of it, literally somebody else made the movie, and he was just like zoned out in the back somewhere.
That's wild, but not unbelievable in the slightest.
Yeah. And speaking of Stephen King, if you want to be terrified, I read The Stand post-COVID. Do y'all remember The Stand? It was a classic 80s or early 90s miniseries too. Like, again, I'm aging myself here. I watched the original miniseries, which was awesome. It was kind of like, binge watching something, a miniseries back in the day. But read The Stand post-COVID. It will terrify you because it's literally like he had a precognition of what the COVID situation was. Because The Stand, guess what? It's about a lab manufactured virus that escapes and obliterates society. And almost overnight, society becomes this incredibly dystopian place where only a small percentage of the human population is left, and they have to fend for themselves against the literal forces of evil that have now emerged and basically recreate society somehow. It's really frightening.
Yeah, that is so weird when movies line up. I'm not sure if you know this movie. It's with Adam Driver where this train derails and there's like this chemical explosion. It was so weird how the exact same incident, I believe, happened either a couple of weeks before it got released on Netflix, and I was like, yeah, that's the irony there. It's too on point. It's almost like predictive programming or something.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, the train, that's one of the wildest Bigfoot theories I've ever heard. So at some point in the past in the mountains of North Carolina, this train carrying Wild Bill Hickock and his like traveling show, I think Annie Oakley was in that. So Wild Bill Hancock, Annie Oakley, and had all these exotic animals, lions, bears, and tigers, etc. But this is true. The train wrecked over this bridge, right? Like this huge cliff. And it basically wrecked and fell off and everything. And it was a horrific, horrible incident. The local people still talk about going and sifting through the wreckage and everything. But the theory says that a lot of those animals escaped, like these exotic animals, and that they became responsible for future cryptid sightings, But then I had someone else tell me, yeah, no. But here's where the Bigfoot comes in. One, they were getting confused for Bigfoot sightings. You can imagine a lion is just not supposed to be out in the woods in North Carolina mountains, right? So if it was out there and like, you might think, what the heck is that? But then someone told me that they believe the indigenous Bigfoots procreated with the escaped bears and created this offshoot of Bigfoots that are still out there. So that was one of the wildest Bigfoot theories I've ever heard involved
That
an
is
actual
wild.
train
Wow.
wreck. Yeah.
That's crazy. Couldn't imagine seeing a cryptid like cross between a lion and a Bigfoot. That would be wild. Huh.
Well, and for whatever reason too, Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings and paranormal events in general, they do have correlation. They have crossover for whatever reason. They tend to happen a lot together.
I hear that people see orbs like before or after Bigfoot encounters, so yeah, makes you think.
I gotta ask, Paul. I gotta
Go ahead.
ask real quick if there's any way we can get the Bigfoot call. Can we get the Bigfoot call that you do? Is there any way we
Not
can
the
get
whoop.
it?
I mean, I think I can handle that. I might have to move my mic back a little bit.
It's got.
And
Let's go.
yeah, and by the way, before I do, I've been sipping on this coffee mug. I won't say what's in it, but shout out, to a couple
Let's
people that
go.
have been good to me. This coffee, y'all, if you've never, you should check it out. It's Area 51 Coffee Company. Not making that up. Let's see. There we go. Area 51 Coffee Company. Shout out to them. They were kind enough to send us some free samples of their coffee too. And we didn't understand why at first. We were like mega buzz, like holy cow, this stuff has got us really awake. They make this kind that's like triple caffeinated, and that's part of what they sent us. And we're like sipping on the triple caffeinated kind. And before I do my call, I got to give a shout out to another great friend of mine and of all things unexplained, and his name is Tracy Arvin, y'all. And he had this Bigfoot encounter as a child. This Bigfoot would stalk him on his way to his bus stop. Okay. Like it would be in the woods shadowing him as he walked. He lived in rural Tennessee, and he had walked down quite a path to get to the bus stop. And this thing would shadow him essentially in the woods as he would go to the bus stop. And it moved him so much. At some point later, he started making his own moonshine. This is Smoky Mountain Squat Shine. And I've got probably far too many free samples of Smoky Mountain Squat
That's
Shine.
awesome.
But give them some love and shout out to my friend
Oh yeah.
Tracy Arvin. All right, here we go. All right, I'm trying to think of how many creatures and people I'm going to disturb with this.
That was our first ever Bigfoot whoop
Epic.
on the portal room.
So epic.
That was awesome.
Did I
Get a
tell
little
you
water
about
after that?
all things? Did I ever tell you about when I was outside here, and I think that we actually had something along those lines that were out right outside of our apartment here? Did I ever tell you about that, or did you hear about that?
No, what happened?
I heard something that was like similar to that. Started off like high, right? It was like ooh, and there was like ooh, like that. It like went down, like all the way down, so it was like really low, but it was just as loud as what you were doing right there, and it was in the trees, like right next to us. It like scared the crap out of myself and my wife. We ran, like we ran inside. We're like, oh, you know what I mean? We ran so fast inside. And the only thing I couldn't get it out of my mind. I thought that it was immediately like, that's a Bigfoot. Like that is a Bigfoot. And it sounded almost like a female as well. Like it sounded like a female. It was so interesting because but yeah, it was wild, like listening to that and then like making the correlation as well. It was really intense. Very cool, man. Thank you for doing that.
Oh yeah, thanks for asking that. I haven't done it in a while, but like I said, my kids and I, we have this whooping Bigfoot call system, where we do it in the neighborhood or we're off traveling somewhere, and we'll do it to stay in contact with each other. Works better than walkie-talkies, in my opinion, and better than cell phones or Apple Watches or anything. And we've been lucky. We've had a lot of great Bigfoot guests on the show with us too. And Patricia Cornwell came on to talk about one of her books that delved into the Bigfoot topic, and the murder was kind of blamed on a Bigfoot, but turns out, of course, it was a person that did it. But one of our guests, his name is Kalani Lapsaridis, and he lives in the middle of nowhere, Washington State. And if you've never been out there, sometimes you hear people say, how could we have not discovered a new large species of animal if it's out there? If you go out there to Washington State, Oregon State, and you look at those woods, you're like, yeah, I don't know what's out there, but I know ain't nobody seeing it. Ain't nobody going out there anytime soon. And if you did, anything out there would know you're coming for miles away. I mean, there's no way you would just sneak up on it. It is thick, it is dense, it is fast, it is gigantic, it is mystical. and anything could be out there. But Kwani Lapsaritis, he's out there. His internet was horrible. He only had like a satellite phone, and so he could barely communicate with us before the show. But he wrote a book called The Psychic Interdimensional Bigfoot. And he believed that indeed Bigfoots not only were psychic, but they could cross interdimensional portals of some sort somehow. And that this explained, a lot of the problem with, seeing them and them disappearing easily and that sort of thing. So I always thought that was a very interesting theory about the Bigfoots.
I've heard the same thing, that one of the theories is that there's two that I think, or it's that they could somehow be these advanced primates from back then that went off into another direction, kind of the way people like to label the ultra terrestrials, I guess, if that makes sense. And then it could be from the future, like these primates somehow evolving over time with this technology, or that they're just native to the land and that they're not even entirely like a creature, but maybe like a spirit or something.
Right.
I know there's lots of different theories basically, but I like the idea of what you were saying about how they travel through dimensions and portals and whatnot, because it really hits on like this I don't know, I think I would say more paranormal aspect of reality, but at the same time it makes you think about time. Like that's where my mind goes whenever I think about Bigfoot. I'm like, what point in time did this thing evolve if it is this creature that's able to kind of blend itself into its environment or cross through dimensions or portals? Like what is that? Like, so that's where my mind goes when I think about theories on Bigfoot. But I did want to ask you one thing here. You have a couple of slides and things here. Did you want to maybe go through some of these and whatnot? What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be cool if y'all want to bring up this
Yeah.
viral pyramid story from recent days on Twitter.
Is that where it starts, or does it start?
I'll tell you what, let's start with the viral post. It's called the viral post. So essentially, most of us are familiar with how recently this story just took off on Twitter about, scientists. This is how Twitter portrayed it. Scientists discover huge underground stuff beneath the pyramids, right? Like that's how it was portrayed on Twitter. And we saw some of this play out. Like we saw things like this, right? Where you have this AI generated image of this fantastical discovery underneath the pyramids. And here's a post by Billy Carson, 3.8 million views that had as of March 22nd. And Billy Carson, sure enough, has since went on to be on a lot of shows talking about the pyramid discovery. And guys, that's a red flag, okay? When the guest you have on, and no offense to anybody, but when the guest you have on to talk about an archaeological discovery are personalities from Twitter instead of, let's say, someone from the research team, that's a red flag. You don't have an archaeologist, you don't have an Egyptologist, you don't have someone from the University of Cairo. You have Billy Carson on to talk about it, which is fine, but that's a red flag as to the validity of exactly what is being portrayed about the thing. And look at that AI generated image. I mean, honestly, if that was discovered beneath the Great Pyramid, first of all, it would be the greatest discovery in the history of human civilization. Second of all, it would literally rewrite all of human history. It would change everything instantly. And by the way, it would be all over the news, the mainstream scientific publications, not just on Twitter, right? We had Joe Rogan pick it up. Here's another post about scientists discovering something, and here's another fancy diagram. I mean, look at that. I mean, if anybody in mainstream society believed that this was underneath the pyramids, they'd be like, whoa, what have I believed my whole life? Like, what could have been responsible for this? We had people comparing them to the Twin Towers on Twitter. Like, man, these things that they discovered look how tall they are. They're taller than the Twin Towers. And a few websites picked it up, like this one. Look at this, said Egyptian pyramids hiding vast underground city. And here's just another post. And we had some websites pick up on the skeptical side of it, like this one from The Sun, scientists at war over these bombshell study claims. And here's from the Tribune, experts dismiss the viral claims. But what really caught my attention, Paul, you see the clip that says Malanga clip? It's right next to the one you just pulled up.
Yeah, I see it right here. Let me add that in.
So maybe we could listen to that real quick.
Professor Corrado Malanga,
Yeah, definitely. Let me get this going here.
head of the research project, a chemist and former researcher at the University of Pisa, with a long-standing career in the study of consciousness and the phenomena related to perception of reality. His expertise has enabled the development of new interpretative models for analyzing the discovered structures.
Yeah, so this is Nicole Ciccolo.
Wow.
She's on the research team. This is her official press release about the quote pyramid discovery. And the lead researcher, she says, is Professor Malanga. And how does she describe him? As a chemist, but also an expert in consciousness and interaction with consciousness. Maybe I can hear this again real quick.
Professor Corrado Malanga, head of the research project, a chemist and former researcher at the University of Pisa, with a long-standing career in the study of consciousness and the phenomena related to perception of reality.
And the phenomenon related to the perception of reality. Now, you think about those words. Words mean things, right? And what she did there, she really made a clever play on words, or she made a clever description of his past, of his academic interest, by saying those words. Because I started to wonder, well, who is this Professor Malanga? And she's not wrong. He has research in consciousness. But guess what? It is extensive research in alien abductions. That's his research into consciousness. And by the way, I want to say, hey, Pix, what's happening? Pix is in the chat. I want to say I've reached out to the research team. I reached out to Malanga. I reached out to Ciccolo. And I sent them emails in English and Italian. I haven't heard anything back yet, by the way. But I did reach out. Like I did, again, this is in my particular skill set that we were talking about. Like I like to dig into things and try to get to the truth. I think it's in there somewhere. But yeah, Professor Malanga, turns out he's done extensive research into alien abductions. And guys, this is the conclusion that Malanga came to. He came to the conclusion that a parasitic alien race or races, that they were interdimensional, that abductions were the result of them interacting with our consciousness through manipulative means, and that they were essentially abducting us for our souls, that they were using our souls to energize them, to give them something like a battery, immortal life, longer life, to power their needs, right? And he came to the conclusion that there was no good aspect to this aspect of the phenomenon, alien abduction. I'm not saying the people that believe there is a good aspect are wrong. All I'm doing is saying what Malanga believed. And Malanga was the lead researcher on this pyramid project. Malanga wrote a lot of books about alien abductions. One was about sightings of the Virgin Mary, and he deduced that it was encounters with aliens. This was very reminiscent of Diana Pasulka's research, right? He wrote another book about abductions and aliens, and the co-author went on to form a group in Italy called the Tuscany Stargate Project. And Malanga held a technical position of leadership in the Tuscany Stargate Project. Turns out there were many Stargate projects in Italy. And Paul, you can't make this up. You know, I see it on the top row. Do you see Expedition Nicole?
Yes, let me add that in here. This
It's
one,
just an
correct?
image, yeah. That's the woman from the press release. You're not seeing this on Joe
Oh
Rogan
yeah,
and
yeah.
and all the news. Do you think she's into Egypt?
Yeah,
a little
maybe
bit.
just a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm not
Oh yeah.
knocking it. I'm not knocking it. It's fine. I think it's pretty cool, to be honest. But it does make you realize there's a lot more to this story, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
she's on the research team. This is from Expedition Nicole Ciccolo. And then Paul, something else. This is their YouTube page for the project, okay? And then Paul at the very bottom row, it says research YouTube.
Yes.
Check out this. This is from the conference. This is just look at the repeating art when you hover over it.
Right. The portal,
gives
right,
you-
with the pyramids.
And the satellite. And the
Yeah,
But the
satellite
satellite,
where
exactly.
the SAR data came
Yep.
from. Do you want to take a gander at what they think is in the pyramids or underneath
Oh yeah,
the pyramids?
of course.
Yeah.
I
let's
think
do
it's
it.
interesting how she phrased it as well when she was speaking about who this individual was. I think that was a good way to kind of preface, or it might have been like a tactical way to preface, what the actual findings are before getting too heavily into what I think a lot of people would consider like woo, right? You know what I mean? Because that's heavy duty. That's like heavy, heavy duty.
Right. And I think what's important is to look at the paper itself. Paul, do you see the very first image? It says conclusions.
Yes, I got that one here.
This
Here
is
we
the
go.
conclusion of the paper itself. In this paper, we have shown how it is possible to use SAR micro motion Doppler tomography in an advantageous, economical, non-invasive, and rapid way to make a valid contribution in the study of the structure of ancient megalithic monuments such as the Pyramid of Kunum Khufu. We are aware that only by confirmation on the field of our findings can we validate our hypothesis. This is a far cry, folks, from saying on Twitter that this was discovered underneath the pyramids. They make it clear here this is not the actual case. They go on, however, it seemed logical to provide a hypothetical interpretation based on the data we collected that could serve as a starting point for future research. In the near future, we would like to extend the SAR methodology to the investigation of the internal structure of other important monuments of the Giza Plateau. So they make it very clear
Right.
in the conclusions that they did not discover or confirm that something like the images you were seeing earlier actually is or exist under the pyramid.
Could this have been like, I guess you can say, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sorry about that, but is
No,
this like
you're
kind
fine.
of, is this kind of like maybe like a PR push to maybe do a little more experimental research, would you say?
Well, on their part, yes. And then on the part of why it went well, and plus, I'm going to give them props here. I'm not going to pull the paper itself up, but it's a pretty good paper. It has some issues, but it is chock full of mathematics and physics and that sort of thing. Now, it's a catch-22. I was talking to somebody about this earlier. I understand, on one hand, academics are supposed to declare their biases in their paper. Like, you just lay it out there. Like, these are the biases that exist, and you acknowledge this could affect the study in some way. They do not declare their particular proclivity towards these pyramids and what they believe is in there, and alien abductions and all the woo aspect, right? But the catch-22 is they also understand, and I've talked to a lot of academics who know that, you know, if they do this, they run the literal risk of their career. Like, that could be the end of them if they declare such biases. And so academics have learned, hey, I may have had my own paranormal encounters and experiences, and I may have these beliefs, but I can't just lay it out there in my academic paper. I just can't. So it is a catch-22. And then as far as the Twitter part, Paul and Christian, I think it's a combination of things. One, we're living in a world right now was very similar to something that was happening in the 50s. Flying saucers were a rage. People were getting paid to go on radio and television shows to talk about UFOs. Okay. But guess what? In order to get invited back, they couldn't just go back with the same story. It had to be something new. And it had to be something fantastical, even more fantastical than the last time, or they wouldn't get paid to go on to the next show. And so this resulted in some people who may have had an original, authentic experience, but then the next thing you know, they're on a TV show talking about, oh yeah, well, they actually ended up on Mars interacting with the aliens. Then the next thing you know, they actually were told a message by the aliens on Mars to bring back to the Earth. You know, like every show they went on, it got more and more. And we're kind of experiencing something similar to that right now. There's such a race to be the first to put something out there, right? Like to have it go viral, that sort of thing, to be the first to publish it. It's a mix of that and laziness, right? Like they don't really dig into anything. They just post it, right? Like, and hope for the best. And they hope it's real and they hope it's authentic. And they don't really care if it's not, to be honest. So we have a lot of that happening. And I think that's partly to what explains the virality of this whole story.
Right. So I've got a little bit of maybe perhaps a different interpretation of this. And I think that it maybe ties into what we were talking about earlier. About how they like to put it in a new box and move it, right? Do you think that it's possible that because of the nature of Malanga's work, that before coming forward with the actual data and this massive push of almost what it seems like misinformation or, misrepresentation of the facts, is intentional to possibly discredit Malanga? I think that this is an aspect of this, because we see these things that blow up, right? They blow up. They're not the actual story. And then individuals that actually are doing the work are discredited and they're thrown and cast off to the side. Do you think that could be an aspect of this?
I do. I mean, it definitely could be. And that's the catch-22 I was talking about. And I've tried to be real careful. Like I said, I'm open-minded and I treat all the guests. And I've reached out to them. I want them to come on All Things Unexplained or with you guys and tell us about their research and the alien abduction side to it and everything. And I'll be receptive and with an open heart and an open mind, and I'll treat them with respect. But again, this goes back to me, my belief that people should be able to make up their own minds, right? And I've tried to be careful with this story. Like, I acknowledge that on one hand, it might seem like I'm trying to discredit them by relaying the full story, but I've also tried to be careful to let people know that, okay, that's not what I'm actually trying to do. I just don't think what's being portrayed in the viral post, that's not the whole story, right? And I think the whole story is more fascinating than the viral post that we're seeing. For one thing, it's just inaccurate to say that they discovered this beneath the pyramid. That's just inaccurate. And another thing, it's not nearly as interesting, in my opinion, as the real story. So,
Totally agree.
Totally.
yeah. And
Yeah.
Paul, do you see the PowerPoint? Speaking of Malanga, and it says Malanga. It's on the far right. You had it pulled up
It's
earlier.
the one I initially pulled up, right? It's
Right,
the same
yeah.
color as our screen
Oh,
here.
yeah. And I thought, just give y'all an idea about who Professor Corrado Malanga is. And again, I reached out to him. He started with this book and he co-authored it with a fellow named Roberto Pinotti. And Pinotti is the one that went on to found the Tuscany Stargate project. And this book,
Wow.
the English translation is BVM, Beata Virgin Mary, Blessed Virgin Mary. And essentially they deduced that, or came to the conclusion based on their research, that these sightings of the apparitions of the Virgin Mary were alien in nature. So here we have a connection between religious experiences, and aliens. Again, very, very reminiscent. It made me wonder, and I want to reach out to her if Diana Pasulka is familiar with any of Malanga's work. The next book by Malanga, the English translation, Genesis, Man, Universe, and Myth. It explored human origins, the universe, the myths around them. They discussed the connection between ancient myths and modern understandings of the cosmos. And by the way, look at the cover of that. Very interesting.
Kind of
Very-
reminds me of like Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia, like the themes, right?
Oh, you're right.
The archetypes. Yeah.
And in the next book he wrote, and this one got him in hot water. This one was actually so controversial within the UFO community, at least in Italy, that it kind of put him on the outs with the Stargate project and part of the UFO community there as well. Malanga, he investigated the psychological aspects of UFO sightings and alien abduction experiences. And remember what Ciccolo said, consciousness and the perception of reality. This is what she was talking about.
Yes.
He, in this book, UFOs Inside the Mind, discusses how the phenomenon is linked to human consciousness. That's
such a hardcore aspect.
Yes,
Yep.
for sure. And he said aliens implant their own memories inside the minds of abductees. So, this has been part of the issue for me. You have to, I want to treat everybody with respect, but we all know of some experiencers, who believe that there's a very positive side to this, or that they have this positive experience. But Malanga, this is not my opinion, but Malanga, who did extensive research into this, believed that these people were being manipulated by a force that was showing them something that they wanted to see, and that they were being manipulated, for their own nefarious purposes of these interdimensional parasitic beings. Malanga described them as parasitic. Okay. And so it makes you wonder about this sort of thing. His next book, also very controversial, English translation, Aliens or Demons, The Battle for Eternal Life. Now, this I found fascinating. He explored the hypothesis that alien entities have demonic characteristics. And we've heard a lot about this from people, a lot of different people. And he analyzed the implications of alien abductions on the human soul and consciousness. Here were some mind-blowing things that came out of this book for me. And first of all, it made me realize, we're familiar with some alien abductees in America, but clearly there's a whole database of abductees in places like Italy, right? It made me wonder, can I find out some of this research and these people that he interviewed and studied that were abducted in Italy, for example? I would love to be able to look into those case files. But listen to this. Malanga believed, he developed his own protocols for severing the connection between this parasitic alien presence and the abductee. He believed
my
that
God.
this was a serial occurrence, that these abductees had this happen to them over and over. And tell me if any of this sounds familiar. We've heard of these things, right? He also believed that this was hereditary. Malanga believed that only a certain percentage of the population had souls that aliens were interested in abducting, and that this, whatever this aspect of us was, that it was passed on from parents to children, for example. Malanga developed protocols for ending this. This also reminded me of Dr. Gary Nolan, who's described similar scientific experiences or experiments to end repetitive, recurring serial encounters that are not wanted or desired. He described his own self in this way, that he himself, Dr. Nolan, could not stop his encounters with whatever this was, right? And Malanga knew this too. Okay.
Did you see Screen's comment there real quick?
No, what wasn't?
He said, I'll post it here again. So he he said Sarfati is working in a group with Nolan and some others based in Italy that he can't talk about. So yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. He's definitely
and
incorporating his work.
would it surprise you if, and I'm not saying he is, but would it surprise you if Malanga was in that group?
No, I've never heard of this guy. This is really, really great research that you've done on this. This is insane, man. And I just want to point out the fact too that how you encapsulated the aspect of this research right initially with like the consciousness and perception aspect. And we've been hitting on this theme so much on the Portal Room the past couple of episodes with how like it, whether or not abductions are just conscious or metaphysical and all the variations of that, and then how hypnotic regression plays into these things, and then also what you were just hitting before we changed the slide here about how this could be hereditary and whatnot, and how there's processes to getting these things out of your your life and whatnot. So I just want to say that it's really, really great research is what you're doing. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No,
but please
thank you.
proceed.
I appreciate that. And you know what? This is really fascinating too. Someone at some point told Malanga that his protocols for severing these abductee connections with the alien presence, they told him, you know what you're doing is very similar to the protocols that Scientologists use. I kind of almost hate to bring up Scientologists, but this is what someone else told him, that they use this something called auditing to deal with alien interaction in some way. But Malanga pushed back on that. This ties back what you just said, Paul. Malanga said, no, this is not the same. What Scientologists do in the auditing is figurative, like it's symbolic. Malanga said, what I am doing, and Paul, you're talking about consciousness and hypnotic regression and stuff, but this should, in terms of the Malanga point of view, put some of that to bed. Malanga said, there's this figurative, I am literally dealing with an interdimensional parasitic creature or being that I am stopping from interacting with this person. He said, I am literally doing this. It is not figurative. It is not just in the mind, although it might just be in the mind or the soul or the consciousness of the human. But on the other side of that dimensional connection is a literal, real being that is exploiting humankind. That's what Malanga said.
Wow, that's almost like a simulation. You're gonna get a lot of people. I see Carlos there in the chat. Big fan of the show Severance. I mean, I am as well. So when you said like that that unsevering part, it made me think of that show right away. And this whole like simulation theory, you tie that into like an NHI operating on that level, and it makes sense. But does he kind of go over like some of his techniques on how he unsevers these people? Or
No, I mean he probably does, but I was not able to turn
that
that
you
up.
didn't come across?
Well, right, and keep in mind all this is also translated from interviews in Italian too.
Right.
And so this is some pretty thick stuff, and some of it's pretty hard to find. He wrote another book called Cheops, The Factory of Immortality. Okay, notice the cover of the book. This is by Malanga, the lead researcher in the viral pyramid story. He examined the Great Pyramid of Giza and its potential connections to ancient technologies aimed at achieving immortality. This is his prior research, y'all. Malanga suggests a link between pyramid structures and consciousness preservation. That's a pretty interesting statement. He suggests a link between pyramid structures, which, by the way, they're using satellite SAR data to interpret now, and consciousness preservation. I mean, Paul and Christian, what do y'all think when you read those things?
I think of so many things. Like, I'm sure you've done some research on ancient sites, or at least baseline. But a lot of these have like astrological alignments, and some of them are even placed because of like how like the pole shifts and all of like this other frequency stuff. And then you coincide that with how these things were even built, right? Like, there's so much mystery to the ancient world. And I always say this, I think that the whole UFO phenomena or NHI phenomena, it intersects with a lot of like the advanced ancient technology and whatnot. Like, a lot of that stuff I feel like intersects. But that's what I think of. I mean, I'm not sure if that's even relevant to what we're talking about, but that's where my mind goes automatically. Like, it goes to like sacred geometry, it goes to like frequency, and then all this other stuff that has to do with the technology, and some of even like when you look at how they thought about the afterlife too, and the communication that they had with a lot of like the gods. It could maybe allude to an NHI. I mean, I don't know. That's typical ancient aliens hypothesis, right? But that's kind of where my mind goes.
Yeah, my kind of ticks a lot of boxes, right? Especially if you look, how do I frame this? If you look at how and where we're headed, right? It ties very heavily into the quantum realm of things and the quantum realm of information. And I was talking with Screen last night on one of his posts about the ark. Okay, the ark was built in qubits. What is quantum information stored on? Qubits. 43, I believe I asked AI this, I believe it was 43,000 qubits it would take to store all the information of life on this planet on. And I could very, very easily see the pyramids being structures that house this information, especially with what they are starting to allude to as far as what these structures could be and what their purpose also could be for, as far as what is it Malagna or Malanda? Sorry.
I've just been saying Malanga, but I think that's how
Malanga.
Ciccolo pronounced it.
Yeah, Malanga, especially with his research about what he's speaking about as far as, kind of like energy harvesting from souls is concerned, or the energy of life, like the life essence of information. I believe that we are frequency, and as you can see, it's almost like we're moving to like that singularity moment where we're able to take all of what our life is, right, already, and give it like digitize it. We've been moving in this direction for so long. Like to me personally, I believe it's orchestrated. I believe that it is an orchestration for us to be able to create like another layer almost of our existence that we wouldn't be able to necessarily wake up from, to see what is actually happening around us with these like possible beings that are there that are doing these things. So I definitely, that's it. It checks all my boxes. So what do you call it? I think they're on the right path.
Oh yeah, great comments, Paul and Christian. Paul, can you do me a favor? There's some comments in the chat from UFO Busters, that UFO show Australia. Can you pull one of them up?
Which, let me see, is it
Oh, it
this
doesn't matter.
one?
That'll work. So I want to give a shout out to UFO Busters, that UFO show in Australia. They have a YouTube channel, which is terrific. They are friends of the show, All Things Unexplained. And folks, UFO Busters, they're in the middle of Australia, and they film some incredible sights in the night sky. Check out their YouTube channel. Give them a follow. Give them a subscribe. Check out some of their videos. Great people, middle of Australia. Marie, our friend from Australia, meet UFO Busters. Maybe they're right down the road from you. Y'all can get together and spot some UFOs. Christian, you brought up, I'm so glad you did, the Ark. You were talking about the Ark of the, you were talking about Noah's Ark, weren't you?
I was, yeah. Noah's Ark, the preservation of life through the destruction, the cyclical destruction.
Right. And, Noah's Ark kind of ties in with Graham Hancock and, this notion. We don't know how many ancient apocalypses that the earth has been through in human society. We don't know how many versions of human society has existed before what we know about now, right? And at first I thought you were talking about the Ark of the Covenant. I do want to tell you about an exciting show I've got coming up on the 16th. I'm excited about it. Wednesday, the 16th of April. I've assembled a round table of experts on this recent news. A CIA document revealed the use of a remote viewer to look for the Ark of the Covenant. And so I've got some religious experts coming on. I've got some remote viewing military experts coming on. It's going to be a pretty exciting show. And back to the pyramid, somebody, I was telling them about Malanga and everything, and they wondered, and I thought, you know what, that's brilliant. Remember this giant UFO Ross Coulthart used to talk about?
The one they built a building over, supposedly? Yeah.
Yes. You see where I'm going with this? The one they
Absolutely.
built. I don't know if it's a building, but that's a pretty clever way. That's a pretty clever thing to call a pyramid. Somebody built it. And here, this entire topic is that it's built on top of something. Ross Coulthart, it kind of checks all the boxes. He said it was important to these different governments. He said he didn't want it to get bomb rushed by, YouTubers.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you wonder, maybe the Great Pyramid is the building on top of the giant UFO. Let me know if I'm right in email, Ross. I'll keep it private. I promise. But I think, when we look at all the evidence here, I think we can really get a good feel for what they're really looking for out there in Egypt and what they really think is possibly there and was possibly happening in the past. Paul, you'll appreciate his next book here by Corrado Malanga, TCT, The Rediscovered Consciousness. And that, I thought this was interesting. I'd never heard of this. Maybe y'all had, but TCT stands for Triad Color Test. He discussed techniques for regaining and understanding human consciousness. Perhaps this was associated with his protocols, the use of colors to affect consciousness. And he uses a tool for a consciousness analysis. I'm not familiar with the Triad Color Test or what it is, but Malanga believed that it had something to do with consciousness. Have y'all ever heard of this theory?
Yes, there's actually a therapy that I think maybe you've heard of it, right? But what is it? EMDR, the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, and I think they use certain colors and like it kind of like, I guess I'm not quite sure what type of therapy it's for. I think it's for like trauma or something like that, but a lot of people say they get good results. So I have heard at least a version of that type of therapy being used with color, because it's almost like I guess reconnecting or I guess what you were saying earlier, unsevering some of like the trauma roots, but
Uh,
they do other stuff with it. I'm not quite sure what they do specifically, but it
you
is
know what?
called
Stoned Picker
color
in the
therapy.
chat has a good comment about
Okay,
this.
oh yes, let's see. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what the therapy is, by the way. I just want to finish that thought. But I know I've heard of that before. Again, yeah, it's EDMR. So he says, yes, I worked for a greenhouse for 5 years, and the rows and rows of vibrant color does something to your psyche, makes you feel good. That makes sense, to be honest. That makes sense.
This reminds me what he said there of like this psychological manipulation for shoppers, how they've studied, from the sounds to the colors of a
Right,
department store, like which combinations make you more likely to purchase things. Ve- Very interesting. So there clearly is a
right.
lot of science behind that. And then look at this next book, Avidion, The Soul of Colors, explores the relationship between colors and the human soul. And he suggests that colors have intrinsic meanings that can influence consciousness. I think that's really interesting. His next book was literally called Consciousness. I go back to Ciccolo's comments in the press release. He's an expert in consciousness, and his studies were integral in our pyramid research. Malanga said this was a concise work focusing on the nature of human consciousness, and I don't know what, but it discusses methods to achieve higher states of awareness. I mean, Malanga believed that these parasitic beings, like they were having physical interventions with us, that they were implanting things in our memory and our consciousness. He also described a lot of different kinds. He described tall whites, reptilians, insectoids, grays. He talks a lot about the soul, the spirit, the mind. Oh, and here we go. Malanga, to counteract alleged interference, he developed methods such as the flash mental simulation, aiming to help individuals reclaim autonomy over their consciousness and sever unwanted extraterrestrial influences. This reminds me of those disclaimers you see before you watch a show on Netflix, right? Like warning,
Right.
contains flashing images and stuff. And Malanga said all hell broke loose after he wrote UFOs Inside the Mind. And again, it caused a split between him and the Tuscan Stargate group. And he talks at some point, I won't read all this, but about this is creepy though. I mean, maybe I'll read a little bit. He talks about a 6-fingered alien that uses a physical body only when it needs it, but actually does not have a body. It partially disconnects the abductee's soul and brings it to his dimension, and there, with no hurry and using the proper equipment, this is terrifying, by the way, he draws the energy he needs. After this milking process, the soul, which never totally disconnects from the abductee's body, not even in this lapse of space-time, gets to be normally connected again to the body of the legitimate owner until the next exploitation. That is disturbing. And I
Oh
found
my
a
God.
sketch where Malanga or someone sketched what they believed, where they believed this was happening at, and it's a disturbing sketch as well. The cloning chamber, because Malanga talks about this notion of cloning and copies. And he said that the cloning was from birth somehow, and the copies involved adults in some sort of way. And I think this really description of the six-finger alien, Paul and Christian and people in the chat, I think this gives us really the true insight and why so much of this is covered up, but the true insight into what these researchers think they're going to get to at the pyramid. And honestly, I'm not so sure it's a good idea or not.
True.
Think of it like Ghostbusters, all things. Think of it that way. Remember when they have all the, like, you know, all the spirits are all kind of locked into that trap, that plasma trap, right? And then they shut it down, and then boom, we have the second coming. You know what I mean? That's kind of the direction. I think it's like opening Pandora's box. You know what I mean? It's like all of the woes and all of the kind of the way that we perceive reality and the perception of reality will fracture in that moment. And a lot of people, like, this is what I talk about with disclosure. Okay, this is, so we've kind of, we in a roundabout way have reached this point, all things. And I think it's cool that you brought us here with your information, because I feel like a lot of people don't take into consideration the fact that this can fracture people in a way that they can't return from. In a way, it's almost symbolic of what you were saying of the process, right? Of how the soul never really fully connects back until the next exploitation. I think that people don't take into consideration, as far as disclosure is concerned, the fact that when people learn this information about even like what you're speaking about, that it can devastate them to the point of where they're like, I don't even know how I want to exist anymore. You know, it's so ontological that I can see why there's gatekeepers, right? Why there's only like so much knowledge that's given at specific moments in time, because stuff like this would devastate, like absolutely devastate society. It would devastate human beings. It would devastate me. You know what I mean? It would devastate like me as a father, as a husband. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that, you know, like people, like, there's a journey with disclosure, I think, that happens for an individual where they finally learn and come to the acceptance that we don't have control. There's no control to be had in a lot of ways. And that takes a lot of personal acceptance as well as a lot of trial and error in life. So I feel like we're opening up a big can of worms here, but it's cool, man. It's cool that we're getting to that point because it needs to come out a little bit, right? It does. But
yeah, those are good points.
There's the other side to it, right?
Yeah, great points. I love your Ghostbusters analogy. You're right. It does remind me of Ghostbusters. We can only hope and pray that whoever chooses the big boss is thinking about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, though. So that's a really great point. I appreciate that. And you know what? I think that what we're seeing here is, this is now my theory, but it's an educated theory. It's based on the evidence that I've found on Malanga. And by the way, I love what you said about ontological shock. I'm sorry, but that's probably a thing. We could do a whole other show on that, right? Like Nick Pope, who has been on our show multiple times. I appreciate Nick Pope. And he said this recently, that there has to be some explanation for why disclosure hasn't happened, because theoretically it should be easy. And one of the things that would explain it is if the truth is so terrible that all the people involved would not disclose it. That would explain it, and that is a possibility, and is certainly, and this is where I warn people, because if you read about this pyramid news, okay, and you accept any of it, then when you learn the rest, you can't help but go down it. That's right, Pix. The secret too terrible to be told, and I could talk ad nauseum on that, but I won't right now. Here's what I think that these researchers believe is happening there. I think they believe that at some point in the ancient past, and by ancient, this could be very ancient, much more ancient than what archaeologists believe. I think they believe that these pyramids were a Stargate. Either they housed one underneath, inside, or that the pyramid itself was a Stargate through whatever means, technological means, and that there was some sort of agreement. We've heard a modern agreement between the U.S. government and the phenomenon, Eisenhower. I think they believe that there was an ancient agreement between, maybe they weren't Egyptians, maybe they predated the Egyptians by a long shot, between the pharaohs or whoever was in charge of this ancient race. And the pharaohs would use the Stargate to lengthen or empower their own selves. And in exchange, they would offer human soul sacrifices to the parasitic alien creatures on the other side of the portal. I think that's what the researchers believe was happening. And that's pretty disturbing if you think about it. But if y'all saw their research interest tonight, and I think that's where it takes us.
That's so crazy, dude. This is making me think about like all of these Mayan sacrifices to the gods, right? What we were talking about earlier, how these things were maybe perceived as gods. And I like that you're bringing in the fact that this phenomena is very ancient. So you kind of answered my question about your speculation. I was going to ask you, like, if this is ancient, wouldn't there have been disclosure many, many times over? But that's what you're saying is what those agreements are, right? Is that maybe they're seeding us knowledge and technology as we go, right? And then maybe they're not able to deflect the catastrophes, right? But they're able to at least work with us, I don't know, as a civilization. So
Yeah,
you
as a
kind of answered the
preservation
question I was gonna
method,
ask.
right?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
to keep their batteries safe, so that way they don't have to find new ones.
This ties into Graham Hancock's research, right? Like what I was saying, we don't know how many ancient apocalypses this world has seen already. We don't know how many forms of human society have already come and gone. We don't know how many times we've been reduced down to, just a handful of individuals left on this planet to start from scratch again. We don't know how many Adam and Eves there have been, so to speak. Okay, how many times has this happened in the past? We don't know. These pyramids, I mean, they could be there for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. This might not be the first pyramids. These might just be another in a long line of such stargates, okay? And interestingly, one of my favorite guests on All Things Unexplained, and one of our most popular guests, even though I didn't know it was going to be, was a lady by the name of Dr. Astrid Stuckelberger. Earlier, I compared this notion of an ancient technology with modern things happening. Well, Dr. Stuckelberger came on All Things Unexplained. She's in Switzerland, and she relayed information that she had been told about CERN, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, where they accelerate subatomic particles to as close to the speed of light as they can get them to go. And she was told that there are portals that have been opened up in CERN, portals that lead to subatomic dimensions, and that the scientists at CERN had been successful in summoning creatures to come through the portals. She was told that there are 17 such subatomic dimensions that they know of. And I only made this connection recently that, wow, we might be looking at modern attempts to reproduce what was done in the far distant ancient past in Egypt.
It's so crazy. This is I think I remember you putting out that video, Didn't they have several experiments or something with the T-shirt? Am I crazy? Am I making something up here? I
No,
thought
you
I
got that
heard that
right.
they.
And I also
Right?
want to give a shout out real quick, Paul, to you see the latest comment, Strange Invaders, that
Yes.
UFO shows, also from Australia, Strange Invaders, that UFO show thing.
Shout out.
I appreciate y'all, and hi to Campbell and everybody that I see in the chat. I really appreciate all of you. Well, she shocked us with this because she had said that comment on another show before about the portals at CERN, but this next thing she had not said. She said she had been told that the last time one of these creatures came through, it literally left something behind, evidence. It left a scarf behind, of all
There you go.
things. And that just made us scratch our heads. We weren't expecting that. And she also told us a lot of other stuff, like, for example, how there's she said, a underwater CIA base beneath Geneva Lake in Switzerland, and that there's a veritable city under the lake. Okay, that's got tunnels connecting to all sorts of things. And just a little preview of my book coming up. I've done a lot of research, and I'm very aware, by the way, that I'm not just like dangling carrots like, oh, I'm promising this, just buy my book or whatever. But I've done a lot of research into a deep underground military base that just happens to be down the road from me, where I live in central North Carolina. And I've learned a lot about such facilities and the possibility of underground tunnels that are working their way underneath our feet right now, possibly. And certainly, I think Switzerland has this lore, y'all. They have this lore and fascination with tunnels and the underground. And get this, the locals believe that CERN was actually built, and this is again reminiscent of the pyramids. We hear about ancient structures that are built on top of other ancient structures, and how it just continues to repeat itself to the point nobody's for sure what the original thing there was. The locals in Switzerland believe that CERN was built on top of the ancient temple of Apollo, or Apollon, which was some sort of underground, and you can't make this up, connection to either the underworld or another dimension. Can't make that up.
Yep, we're getting that's the meat and potatoes of it all. I think, you know what I mean. A lot of people don't understand, like, it's like you're talking about, Paul, like the sacred geometry, the nature of these, like, specific, like the way that our universe works, right? It's, symmetries, fractals, right?
Yes.
You put the right combination of those things together, you're going to go into other places. It's not easy, right, to do or to figure out, but the information is out there. What do you call it? We're talking a little bit about it in the chat. You know what I mean? Like, we've been talking about necromancers. You know what I mean? And necromancy, to me, also in a way, is exactly what you're talking about. All things is the utilization of these fractals, these geometries, in order to utilize the human spirit, to co-opt it, and then have legions of spirits underneath you, right? That these actual interdimensional entities are they're like, it's all in the lore that they actually do this to extend their life, right? To make them immortal. So it just ticks every box, man. You're on the right track. Keep going.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Paul,
know.
can you pull up the cloning chamber sketch?
Yeah. Let me get that pulled up. There you go.
Thanks. And I'll tell you what else is fascinating, but also scary, is how CERN is actually constructing an even bigger collider, the biggest one ever. And it's literally called something like the Larger Hadron Collider, or bigger hadron collider, but it's going to be even the biggest one ever. Okay, where they're accelerating these subatomic particles toward the speed of light and colliding them and seeing what happens. You know, I've heard someone with a great theory. I used to not give a lot of validity to the possibility we're living in a matrix or a simulation, I should say, until I heard somebody say, we have clues that that could be the case. And one of them is the speed of light. The speed of light essentially is a boundary, much like, did y'all ever play Legend of Zelda? Remember, you'd go walking off to the east and you'd run into some trees. You couldn't go past the trees. There might have been something past there, but you couldn't go past the trees. And you walk off to the east and there'd be an ocean. Couldn't go past the ocean, right? Walk to the north, there'd be mountains. Couldn't, in the game, you could not go past that barrier, right? It reminds me of the speed of light. That's what I heard, right? Like, this is a natural barrier in our universe that we cannot pass. And perhaps the reason is that this barrier was put there. It was put in place by what? I can't tell you, but by something to keep us locked in to our reality, to our simulation. What's on the other side of that barrier? Well, they might be finding out at CERN. I don't know. That might be where they're accessing these subatomic dimensions.
No, I was just going to agree with you. I just wanted to say, I think Strange Invaders' comment was pretty relevant too. The speed of thought is quicker than the speed of light. So, I mean, I can see how they're experimenting with this. It makes me think of the Flash, how he they do the same thing. If you've ever seen the CW show, where they basically have like a particle accelerator, but it's basically himself running in a circle, traversing time and so forth. I don't know, man. The fragmentation of time, frequency, and the atomic particles, it's so overwhelming. It's a lot of information, but I think there really is something to everything that we've gone over tonight. We hit all the total, like, what people would consider conspiracy nut topics, right? We went full on with the UFOs, the abductions. We went on
Astrophysics.
Bigfoot. Yeah, astrophysics. You did your Bigfoot whoop.
Yes, sir.
We went pyramids. We got sacred geometry, everything. So real quick, I wanted to get some last words from you, Dr. Mounce, and from Christian, because I think tonight was probably one of my favorite streams that we've done, and I think everybody should go check out All Things. If you haven't already, go check out All Things Unexplained podcast. We did link all of the links there in the description, so make sure you go and check that out, please. And Dr. Mounce, I'd love to have you back on again, man. We should do this more often. Such a great hang, seriously.
Thanks, I really appreciate that. And, you know, just real quick, here's a sketch that someone made of what Malanga described as the cloning chamber or the copy chamber. And it's pretty, honestly, like nightmare fuel. These tall cylinders where, I don't know, either the parasite beings were going in there or the humans, and you see these tables and some sort of medical instruments and like straps and things and computers, maybe. Who knows what's going on, but this is a sketch made from an interview with Dr. Corrado Malanga. And, you know, my closing thoughts here, I'll go back, I guess, to speed of light real quick. One thing we have to keep in mind, and this, I'll tie it back in the UFO topic here, if you don't mind. Kevin Knuth told us that all the evidence points to the fact that whatever the phenomenon is, it's here. It's here with us. We don't know for how long, but all the evidence points to the fact it's not coming from the other side of the cosmos, the other side of the universe. Maybe it did it sometime in the past. Maybe it's coming from interdimensional stargates that we don't know about. We have to ask ourselves, Paul and Christian, even if we could travel near the speed of light, it's integrally connected in ways we don't even fully comprehend to time and gravity. If we could somehow accelerate ourselves close to the speed of light toward a far off planet and get there within our lifetime, first of all, would you do it? Would it be worth it? Maybe not, when you consider the fact that upon your return to Earth, it might be about 1 million years in the future. And everything you knew will be long, long gone. And how many ancient apocalypses will we have endured while you were on your trip to somewhere else in the universe? So as I say at the end of All Things Unexplained, and I'll close this out because I truly believe it. And one thing I've tried to do since Beast Games is I saw this meme somewhere and it said, you know what? How boring would a movie be if all the main characters did was just sit there and look at their phone? That would be a horrible movie. And it said, do main characters every day. Live life like you're a main character in a movie. And that's how I've decided to attempt to live my life. I don't always accomplish it. It's there in my mind. It's what I strive to do. I strive to go about every day doing main character stuff. That's how I want to live. That's the example I want to set for my kids, for when I'm in a UFO Twitter space, wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing. I want to do main characters. I want to experience it. I don't know how many lives I'm going to have. For all I know, it's just this one. So I think people should get off their phones. I think that they should go out there and celebrate with others, fellowship with other humans, go out in the woods, look up at the stars. Again, you might not find Bigfoot, you might not spot a UFO, but you might find something unexpected, and the best thing of all out there, you might find yourself. And that's what I truly believe.
I love that. That was amazing. Christian, you got any last words?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you again, All Things. I know that this is kind of spur of the moment, but I think it really, it turned into something incredible, I want to thank everybody for coming into our TED Talk on Gnosis. I think, it's introductory, but these are really serious questions. You know what I mean? That I think that they deserve real serious study and real serious answers. And I wanted to tell you something else, All Things, from your picture that you put, that I've seen that before. I actually have, and in a sort of vision that I had. It's almost exactly like that. And there were. I'll tell you about it sometime, but because I know Paul's trying to close it up. But everything you said is extremely that's it, man. We're the main characters in our lives. Embrace your life. Go for it. Don't think about it. Go for it. Don't let things hold you back. The only limitations you put on things are in your own self. So, what do you call it? And try to love and perpetuate some goodness in the world, because if our TED Talk on Gnosis is correct, you know what I mean, get yourself some Squatch moonshine there and have a good time. Right? I appreciate you All. Thanks, Paul. Thank you so much for hosting us again, brother. Appreciate you.
Oh yeah. This was a great one. I'd urge anybody who came in late into the chat tonight to go back on it. We started off kind of neutral and we kind of worked our way into the conversation, but yeah, again, Dr. Mounce, thank you so much, man. Everybody make sure you go to All Things Unexplained on YouTube and all the other podcast outlets. Make sure to also check him out on Amazon on Mr. Beast's Beast Games. So yeah, contestant 718, thanks again, Dr. Mounce. Everybody in the chat, love you guys.
You guys are great.
Portal peeps, this was great. Peace. Have a good night, everybody. Have a good one.